The Hammer Killers, the real story of the Dnipropetrovsk maniacs. They didn't kill out of hatred. They killed because they could. Prosecutor Volodymyr Serdyuk, 2009. Chapter 1. A City on the Edge. Dnipropetrovsk, Ukraine, summer 2007. Nestled in the heart of eastern Ukraine, the industrial city of Dnipropetrovsk, now Dnipro, was a place of quiet ambition. Wide Soviet-era boulevards, iron-gray apartment blocks, factories humming in the background. It was a city caught between the ghosts of the USSR and the promises of post-Soviet capitalism. But in the summer of 2007, something darker began to stir. It started with a whisper, a body found in a park, then another in a suburb. Rumors spread quickly. People started walking home before dark. Teenagers skipped night buses. Parents clutched their children a little tighter. And the bodies kept coming. By the end of July, 21 people were dead, brutally murdered. No clear motive, no pattern. The only link, they had all been ambushed in public spaces. Beaten, stabbed, mutilated. The brutality was unprecedented. The fear was suffocating. Ukraine's media dubbed the killers the Hammer Maniacs, after reports that some victims had been struck with blunt objects, including, horrifyingly, construction hammers. What the public didn't know yet, what even the police were only starting to uncover, was that two teenagers were behind it all. Not trained assassins, not soldiers, not even gang members. Just two middle-class boys with clean clothes, expensive phones, and a camera. And they were filming everything. Chapter 2. The Victims. Before we meet the killers, we must remember the victims. Ekaterina Ilchenko, 48, murdered just meters from her apartment while walking home from visiting her mother. Nikolai Serchik, a retired army colonel, bludgeoned while sitting on a bench. Sergei Yatsenko, 48, a cancer survivor, killed while riding his scooter through the countryside. A pregnant woman, whose name was never released, attacked so brutally that even the police refused to disclose full details. Most victims had no connection to one another. Some were elderly, others were teenagers, some were disabled. One was even a 13-year-old boy, but they all had something in common. They were chosen because they were easy targets. These were not crimes of passion. They were calculated acts of violence, for sport. Chapter 3. Meet the Maniacs. Igor Saprunyuk and Viktor Sayenko were 19 years old at the time of the murders. From the outside, they seemed like any other quiet, middle-class Ukrainian kids. They went to school together, took selfies on rooftops, listened to music, smiled in family photos. But behind the blank stares was something monstrous. Friends described them as withdrawn, but polite. Teachers noticed nothing out of the ordinary. But according to later investigations, the boys had a secret obsession with death, violence, and domination. It started small. Animal torture, videos of dead cats, dogs, birds. They kept a digital archive, cataloged with disturbing pride. Then came the escalation. One day, they brought a video camera to the forest. They wanted to know what it felt like to kill a human being. They picked a man at random. Chapter 4. 3 Guys, 1 Hammer. On July 12, 2007, Sergei Yatsenko, a retired factory worker and father of 2, was riding his scooter near the village of Dnipropetrovsk. He had just visited his grandson. He wore a light blue shirt. He never made it home. Igor and Viktor ambushed him. One held the camera. The other wielded a yellow-handled construction hammer. They filmed the entire attack, the swinging, the crushing, the gasps, the blood. At one point, the camera zooms in on the victim's face as he gurgles and twitches. The video was later leaked to the dark web under the name 3 Guys, 1 Hammer, in chilling parody of a well-known viral meme of the time. It became infamous, a grotesque artifact of real-life snuff horror. The killers wanted it to go viral. They wanted to be remembered. Chapter 5: The Arrest. By late July, police were under immense pressure. 21 victims in 1 month. Protesters stood outside police stations demanding answers. One night, a man recognized a suspect from a local pawn shop. Someone had tried to sell a phone that belonged to one of the victims. The seller? Igor Saprynyuk. When police raided his home, they found a goldmine of evidence. Victims' belongings, dozens of mobile phones, bloodstained clothes, a laptop filled with videos and photos of the murders. Viktor Sayenko was arrested the next day. A third boy, Alexander Hanja, was also detained, not for murder, but for helping rob victims before and after they were killed. When confronted with the evidence, Saprynyuk smiled. He told the officer, "You can't prove which one of us held the hammer." Chapter 6: The Courtroom Horror. The trial of Igor Saprynyuk, Viktor Sayenko, and Alexander Hanja began in June 2008, nearly a year after the murders. The courtroom was packed. Relatives of the victims, journalists, lawyers, even curious locals filled the benches daily. Many had never seen anything like it. The prosecution called the case one of the most brutal and senseless killing sprees in Ukrainian history. Saprynyuk and Sayenko faced 21 counts of murder, plus multiple counts of attempted murder, robbery, and animal cruelty. Hanja, the third accomplice, faced robbery charges but was not implicated in the killings themselves. As evidence was presented, gasps were audible in the courtroom. The jury and attendees were shown parts of the killer's personal video collection, footage of them posing with corpses, smiling as they desecrated bodies, giggling while zooming in on victims' faces. One photo showed Saprynyuk holding up a hammer with a blood-stained glove, standing beside the lifeless body of a teenage girl. Another showed Sayenko making a peace sign beside a corpse. What shocked many even more than the images was the killer's demeanor. They didn't cry. They didn't apologize. They didn't show fear. They acted as if they were bored, said court reporter Alina Kovalchuk, like it was all a formality. At one point, a victim's mother screamed at Saprynyuk from the gallery, "You murdered my son like a dog." Why? Why? He didn't respond. He just stared at her. Blank. Cold. Chapter 7: The Psychology of a Killer. Forensic psychologists were brought in to evaluate both young men. The public wanted to know, what makes someone like this? Both Saprynyuk and Sayenko came from relatively stable homes. No histories of abuse. No known mental illnesses. They were not poor, and they had not suffered childhood trauma in any conventional sense. But deep inside, something had been broken long ago. Investigators uncovered journals and chat logs that revealed a terrifying ideology. The boys believed in absolute control. To them, killing was not evil. It was the ultimate demonstration of power. A game of God. They believed that people were insects, said Dr. Katerina Michailova, a criminal psychologist who reviewed the case. They said the weak deserved to die. They wanted to feel what it was like to have total power. There were also signs of narcissism and sadism. The filming of the murders was not just for documentation, it was for entertainment. Some clips included commentary. In one video, Saprynyuk is heard laughing after a victim begs for his life. The prosecution introduced evidence that Saprynyuk wanted to make a name for himself by selling snuff films to underground websites. While this was never conclusively proven, the volume and nature of the footage they collected pointed to something deeply premeditated. Perhaps the most haunting realization of all. They didn't kill out of hate. They killed out of boredom. Chapter 8: Mothers in Mourning. Outside the courtroom, a very different world existed. A world of grief, silence, and broken families. Lyudmila Yatsenko, The wife of Sergei Yatsenko, the man featured in the infamous 3 Guys, 1 Hammer video, refused to watch the footage in court. "I already saw what they did," she told a reporter. "I saw it when I identified what was left of my husband." Her son described the months after his father's murder as a hole in the ground we fell into and never climbed out of. They never went back to the countryside home. The scooter Sergei was riding was destroyed. His grandson stopped speaking for several weeks. Other families tried to speak out, to raise awareness, to make sure this would never happen again. Some couldn't even bring themselves to give interviews. Their silence said more than any words. In one heartbreaking moment, a woman whose daughter had been killed told the court, "They didn't just kill my child. They killed our future. They murdered trust. I look at teenagers on the street now and wonder, are you like them too?" Chapter 9. Sentencing. After months of testimony, forensic reports, and emotional pleas from the victims' families, the verdict came in. Igor Sapranyuk, life imprisonment on 21 counts of murder. Viktor Sayenko, life imprisonment on 18 counts of murder. Alexander Hanja, 9 years in prison for robbery and accessory to murder. There was no visible emotion from either Sapranyuk or Sayenko as the sentences were read. Some said they expected the death penalty, which Ukraine had abolished in 2000, and life imprisonment felt like a joke in comparison. One of the victims' fathers stood outside the courtroom and said bitterly, "We feed them now. We house them. Our taxes keep them alive. But our children are in the ground." There were attempts by the families of the accused to appeal. Sayenko's mother claimed her son was innocent and framed. She accused the police of fabricating evidence. These claims were dismissed in court after all forensic matches, digital footprints, and confessions were verified. Chapter 10. The Legacy of Fear. In the years following the trial, the Dnipropetrovsk maniacs faded from international headlines. But in Ukraine, their legacy remains. For many, the case was a national trauma. Teachers introduced new anti-violence programs in schools. Parents became hypervigilant. The sale of hammers to minors was briefly restricted in some regions. In 2011, a Ukrainian filmmaker released a documentary about the case. It was quietly removed from YouTube after a few weeks due to public backlash. Many felt it gave the killers too much attention. Others felt the world needed to see what happened in all its ugliness to prevent it from happening again. The internet, however, was less forgiving. The video 3 Guys, 1 Hammer remained in circulation for years, despite efforts to scrub it from websites. It became part of the deep web's dark mythology, a chilling reminder of what 2 human beings are capable of when conscience disappears. To this day, some believe more victims were never found. Journalists and true crime researchers have speculated that the actual number may be closer to 30 or more. Police have never confirmed this. Chapter 11. Where are they now? Igor Sapranyuk is currently serving life in a maximum security prison in Ukraine. He has never shown remorse. In a leaked prison letter, he wrote, "I don't miss freedom, only action." Viktor Sayenko is also serving life, reportedly in solitary confinement due to threats from other inmates. He rarely speaks. One guard described him as a ghost. Alexander Hanja was released in 2017 after serving 9 years. He gave a brief interview in 2019 claiming he was used and had no idea the murders were happening. Few believed him. His current whereabouts are unknown. Chapter 12. Final words. The Dnipropetrovsk maniac's case is not just about murder. It's about the fragility of human morality. The terrifying truth that anyone, under the right or wrong conditions, can become a monster. It's about the banality of evil, wrapped in casual clothes and teenage smiles. And it's about memory, because long after the killers are forgotten, the families remember, the city remembers, and now, so do you. Chapter 13: International Shockwaves. When the Dnipropetrovsk murders made international headlines in late 2008, global audiences were stunned, not just by the scale and brutality, but by how calculated it all was. Major media outlets, BBC, CNN, Der Spiegel, The Guardian, covered the trial, though often with blurred details. The images were too graphic, the facts too grim. But what captivated the Western public wasn't just the crime. It was the killer's motive, or lack thereof. Ukraine was seen as a nation in transition, emerging from Soviet decay, fighting corruption, struggling with identity. But this crime didn't fit the usual narratives of poverty-driven violence or political unrest. This was something else. This isn't about ideology or desperation, wrote journalist Adam Kelso in a 2009 Vice article. This is about two bored kids in a post-Soviet void who decided to become famous by slaughtering strangers. The case also sparked debate around online content. Once the Three Guys One Hammer video leaked, it became a sort of internet legend, passed around dark forums, YouTube clones, Reddit threads. Some users treated it like horror entertainment. Others were traumatized. Governments and advocacy groups scrambled to respond. Internet service providers in several countries, including Germany and Australia, blacklisted URLs hosting the footage. YouTube cracked down on violent content in 2009, in part due to public pressure from this very case. Chapter 14: Snuff Media and Ethical Dilemmas. The footage filmed by Saprunyuk and Sayenko reignited a long-dormant cultural conversation. Do snuff films really exist? For decades, stories had circulated about real murder videos, filmed, edited, and distributed for profit or underground consumption. Authorities often denied their existence. The Dnipropetrovsk case changed that. The killers didn't just document their crimes, they seemed to choreograph them. In one clip, the camera is placed carefully on a backpack for a stable, centered shot. In another, they whisper lines before attacking, as if rehearsed. This wasn't random, it was performance. These weren't just murders, said criminologist Daria Mishenko. They were productions. The camera wasn't just a witness, it was part of the crime. This posed massive challenges for journalists, platforms, and investigators. Do you report on these crimes in full? Do you describe the video? Do you name it? Do you share stills? What if doing so fuels more copycats? One journalist later admitted, writing about this case felt like touching something radioactive. To this day, ethical guidelines on reporting such crimes remain murky. Chapter 15: A City Forever Changed. In Dnipro, then still Dnipropetrovsk, the shadows of the summer of 2007 still linger. Many families of the victims moved away. Some changed their names. Others refused to speak about what happened ever again. For years after the case, locals would instinctively flinch at the sight of a teenage boy in a black hoodie or baseball cap, the outfit Saprunyuk often wore in photos. One cafe near the scene of a murder shut down, citing emotional fatigue in their staff. Churches began holding monthly services in memory of the victims. Teachers rewrote lesson plans to include discussions of empathy, bullying, and moral responsibility. They didn't just kill people, said Father Boredom, a local priest. They shattered the city's sense of safety. We still haven't fully healed. The playground where a young victim was found remained closed for nearly 5 years. No one wanted to let their children near it. Chapter 16: The Copycats. Perhaps the most disturbing legacy of the Dnipropetrovsk maniacs was the influence they had on others. In Russia, 2011, A 16-year-old boy was arrested for killing a classmate with a hammer and posting photos online, mimicking Soprunyak's pose. In Brazil, 2015, police discovered a group of teens running a dark web blog about purging the weak, heavily referencing the Ukrainian case. On 4chan and other fringe forums, 3 guys 1 hammer became shorthand for the worst kind of depravity, and, to some, a badge of edginess. Law enforcement agencies in Europe and the US began quietly monitoring chat rooms and dark web spaces, looking for signs of obsession or planned replication. It became a textbook case in law schools and forensic psychology programs. How 2 seemingly normal teenagers could influence a generation of lost minds. Chapter 17. Can evil be banal? One of the most haunting elements of this story is not how monstrous the killers were, but how ordinary they seemed. They weren't monsters in the shadows. They weren't madmen frothing at the mouth. They were clean-cut, soft-spoken boys with girlfriends, parents, teachers who praised them. They laughed at jokes. They did homework. If they could do this, one journalist wrote, anyone could. The philosopher Hannah Arendt once coined the phrase, the banality of evil, during the trial of Nazi bureaucrats. She meant that evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes, it wears a clean uniform and goes home for dinner. In Dnipro, evil wore sneakers, carried a camera, and liked techno music. Chapter 18. The Final Days. As of 2025, both Soprunyak and Sayenko remain in prison. Sources say Soprunyak has become withdrawn, spending most of his time reading philosophy and sketching. When asked in a 2021 prison interview if he regrets anything, he allegedly replied, "No, it was real. Most people never feel anything real." Sayenko, according to prison guards, speaks even less. He writes letters to his mother, sometimes drawing cartoon characters in the margins. He never talks about the crimes. One inmate told a journalist, "He just sits there like a statue. You'd never think he killed anyone. But then you look into his eyes, and there's nothing there." Their families have stopped granting interviews. Hanja, the accomplice released in 2017, has vanished from public view. Some say he changed his name and fled the country. Others say he lives quietly under an assumed identity in Western Ukraine. No one really knows. Chapter 19. Final thoughts. Why this story matters. Why tell this story? Why revisit something so dark, so painful, so terrifying? Because it happened. Because the victims deserve to be remembered. Because the human mind is capable of great kindness and unspeakable cruelty. And because understanding evil is the first step to preventing it. Stories like this aren't entertainment. They're a warning, a mirror, a challenge. They force us to ask difficult questions. What are we teaching our children about empathy? What role does the internet play in glorifying violence? How do we spot the signs of a killer before they kill? Most importantly, how do we stop the next Soprunyak and Sayenko before they even begin? Chapter 20. The Victims, in Memoriam. Let us end not with the names of the killers, but with the people whose lives were stolen. Ekaterina Ilchenko, 48. Sergei Yatsenko, 48. Valentina Gromova, 55. Nikolai Serchik, 63. Yaroslav Mishchenko, 14. Irina Fedorenko, 32. Andrei Sidorenko, 40. And 14 others not publicly named. Fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, friends, human beings. Not just victims in a case file, but lives full of dreams, laughter, memories. They deserve to be more than statistics. May their memory live longer than the darkness that stole them. The end.